So I want to just talk a few things as a few kind of key ideas, things you might want to keep in mind. As you're writing a story, you have a lead, and the lead is kind of the summary, the most important facts. So and so was arrested. So and so many people were killed, things like that. The next paragraph usually expands. Now, in written format, usually, this is where you might get into more longer titles, maybe more attribution, and you begin to you begin to build on the story. You begin to say, here's the kind of the headline, here's the main facts, and the next one you begin to expand upon it. And then you begin to fold in the question, like, what happened next? What happened, like, what's the next most important fact? How did this thing happen? Those, you start answering those questions as you work your way down. But the second paragraph is, in a lot of ways, a lot of people will say the second paragraph is almost more important than the first paragraph. I personally think the lead is the most important because it's the thing that snags the people. But if you don't then capitalize upon it, you're not going to continue to do it. The key, though, is as you go through the story, you kind of want to continue to expand. And there's a few things that are kind of different about news writing. News writing tends to use very short paragraphs. A couple of reasons. One is we don't start off with like, here today I'm going to talk to you about, and we don't write like an introductory paragraph. We simply start the story, right? There's no reason to introduce the story. It's also important that people sometimes get killed, and today we talk about somebody who got killed. Let's just, like, tell me about what happened, right? You don't start stories like that. You don't use introductory paragraphs. You just go right in. And then what happens is every time you start a new paragraph, it is a form of transition. It says, I'm switching topics. I'm introducing a new character who's going to tell me new information, or a new speaker, a new source. And so every paragraph, every time you start a new source, every time you start a new topic, every time you quote somebody, you should have a new paragraph. And so it's very quick and succinct. You keep short paragraphs and you switch topics quickly. The transition, while, oftentimes in an academic paper you write these transitions that are like, given what we have just learned, or after I finished talking to this person, I decided to go over here and ask this person some questions. That's great if you're writing for an English class, but if you're writing for a newspaper, I assume you walked around and talked to people. I don't need to hear about how you did it. You just tell me what you did. You just tell me what you found. You don't have to go through each step and do these elaborate transitions. Just use words like next, use some words like after that, just some very quick words. It's best to have something that connects each paragraph. You don't want to make wild leaps between them. If you're talking about like a murder, you want to start off with, the victim, and then maybe tell a little bit about them, and then transition over to the accused, maybe transition over to homicide rates. But, you want to have something that connects each paragraph, ideally, like, even if it's just a transition word, but you don't want extensive transition. You just want like a word or two, and you want to kind of organize things in that way. Sometimes you also need to give a little bit of extra detail. Like, for example, some of you have written stories about video gaming. I don't know that much about video gaming. I sometimes play video games with my sons, but we mainly play like Super Mario Brothers. They're little. They're not like into more advanced gaming or anything. And so, although they do, when they're at their mother's house, they will play Minecraft. And I don't know much about Minecraft, and so occasionally they'll say something about it. I was at my son had a Minecraft shirt on, and we went into a gas station, and the guy in the gas station goes, "Oh, something about about creepers or something." And I'm like, okay, I have no clue what that is. And then my son's like, oh yeah, I've had a creeper, blah, 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 and they're talking about this, which I'm just finding kind of an odd conversation. Although I quickly figured out they were talking about characters in this game. I know nothing about it. So that maybe you're doing a story about that. Well, if you're writing to a general audience, you will need to explain some of these things. So you might then say, like you say, the creeper does blankety blank. And then, the next paragraph, you could just put in there something like a creeper is, you explain it. You don't want to get into explanations too early, but you do want to give explanations. And usually it's the kind of thing that you might just sort of be like, hey, I don't know if you need this, but you can put that in its own paragraph, and then you can just kind of continue to move along. But the key here is stories, usually the transition comes in the paragraphs, the short paragraphs keep it held together, and you're kind of going from most important fact to the least important fact. Oftentimes people also with writing think that the end of the story is very important, in that you don't want to just end with just like okay, and then here's one more fact. Usually you kind of like to save something that's not horribly important, but maybe a really good quote, maybe a couple of good facts, things like that, and then that way you can kind of bring the story to a little bit of a you kind of end on a high note. The idea in comedy, you always leave them wanting more. In entertainment, it's always leave them wanting more. Always leave them laughing in comedy. The idea there is you don't want to end your story with like, well, that just ended out of nowhere, right? You kind of want them to go, that was really interesting, right at the end. And so that's always something you might want to think about. Always save something back. You don't want it to be something that's pertinent or something that should be up early, but it might want to save a good quote or a good tie-in or a good other things. Now, in the hourglass format or the narrative style, I'll talk a little bit about that ending that might make a little bit more sense, but that's kind of where that's at.